You were this close. You know exactly what I mean. The opportunity that arrived and then, somehow, you found a way to let it pass. The relationship that was finally what you said you wanted, and then something in you started pulling threads until it came apart. The goal you had been moving toward for months that you abandoned right at the point where it started becoming real. The career you almost had, the love you almost let in, the version of your life that kept arriving and kept being turned away at the door by something inside you that you cannot fully explain and cannot seem to stop. You tell yourself it was timing, circumstances, bad luck, the situation not being right, but somewhere underneath those explanations is a truth you have been circling without quite landing on. You did it, not consciously, not because you wanted to fail, not because the thing you wanted was not real, but something in you keeps arriving at the threshold of what you say you want and sabotaging it. Carl Jung spent decades studying this, not as a moral failing, not as a character flaw, not as evidence that certain people are simply not equipped for the lives they want, as the most precise and predictable psychological mechanism in the human interior. And what he discovered about what is actually doing the sabotage will explain things about your own life that you have been trying to understand for a very long time. Stay with me, because what comes next is not comfortable, but it is the most accurate map of the interior territory that has been costing you everything. Jung said the most dangerous enemy you will ever face is not outside you. It is the part of yourself you have refused to look at. He called it the shadow, not your dark side in some dramatic cinematic sense. Not the worst of you, the rejected self. The parts of your interior life that the environments you grew up in communicated, sometimes loudly and sometimes in silence, were not acceptable. Not safe to show, not compatible with being loved or belonging or surviving in the specific world you were shaped by. So you buried them, not all at once, piece by piece, every quality that received a cold response, every impulse that produced withdrawal rather than warmth, every part of yourself that was too loud or too much or too specific and not enough like what was wanted. You learned to suppress it, and over time those suppressed parts did not simply disappear. They formed a second self, one that runs in the dark, one that operates below the level of your conscious decisions, one that has its own agenda, and that agenda, the shadow's specific and completely unconscious agenda, is the explanation for almost every act of self-sabotage you have ever committed. Here is the mechanism, and I want you to hear this with the specific part of yourself that has been confused about why you keep doing this. Not the part that judges it, the part that genuinely wants to understand. Jung discovered that the shadow does not sabotage your life because it wants you to fail. It sabotages your life because success in its current configuration requires you to continue suppressing it. Read that again. The opportunity you keep passing, the relationship you keep dismantling, the dream you keep abandoning at the exact moment it becomes achievable. The shadow is not working against you. It is working against the version of success that does not include the parts of yourself it is carrying. Let me make this specific, because this is where the theory becomes the map. Think about the specific way your sabotage operates, not in general terms. Your specific version, the procrastination that arrives precisely when the stakes become real, the conflict you generate right when a relationship reaches the depth where being fully seen would be required, the self-destructive choice that appears at the exact moment when something good is consolidating. Jung said these are not random. They are patterned, and the pattern always points to the same thing, the specific content of what you suppressed. Because the shadow does not just hold the qualities you buried, it holds the beliefs that got buried with them. The specific, deeply embedded conviction, formed before you had language to examine it, about what you are actually allowed to have. What kind of life is actually available to someone like you? What happens to people who try to exceed the emotional ceiling of the environment that shaped them? These beliefs are not conscious. If they were, you could argue with them. You could present counter-evidence. You could consciously override them with reasoning and intention. But they are not in the part of your mind that responds to reasoning. They are in the shadow, running below the surface. And every time you approach the threshold of something that exceeds what those buried beliefs say is available to you, the sabotage activates, not as a choice, as a reflex. Here is the turn that most people never encounter. Jung said the sabotage is not the problem, it is the signal. Every act of self-sabotage is the shadow communicating something the conscious mind has been refusing to hear, not destroying your opportunity, pointing at a belief that has been operating without your awareness, marking the location of the buried material that is running your life from the darkness, saying, with the only language it has available, here, This is where the work is. This is the belief that has not been examined. This is the wound that has not been witnessed. This is the part of yourself that went underground, and that your current definition of success is asking you to continue suppressing. And I will keep activating at this threshold until you finally stop and look at what I have been trying to show you. Let me walk you through what this actually looks like in 3 specific patterns, because the shadow does not sabotage in the same way for everyone. It sabotages in the way that is most precisely calibrated to the specific content it is carrying. The first pattern is the success ceiling. You grew up in an environment where exceeding a certain level of achievement, financial, professional, relational, was somehow unsafe. Not because anyone said this explicitly, because the specific emotional atmosphere of the environment communicated it in ways that your nervous system absorbed before your mind could evaluate. People who succeed too much become targets, become different, leave, become something the people who love them no longer recognize. So you learned, below the level of conscious decision, that a certain level of success is the limit. Beyond that limit, something bad happens, and every time you approach it in your adult life, the shadow activates, the procrastination appears, the self-destructive choice surfaces. The opportunity is allowed to pass, not because you do not want what is beyond the ceiling, because part of you is still operating from the belief that going beyond it costs something you are not willing to lose, even if what you would be losing no longer exists, even if the environment that created the belief dissolved decades ago. The belief is still running, in the dark, directing the life, calling it fate. The second pattern is the intimacy threshold. You approach genuine connection, real closeness, the specific quality of being actually known by another person. And something happens. You pick a fight at the worst possible moment. You do the one thing most likely to create the distance that being fully seen would have temporarily closed. You choose the person who is structurally unavailable. You push away the person who was genuinely present in the specific way that feels most dangerous. Jung said this is not fear of intimacy in the simple sense of that phrase. It is the shadow carrying a specific belief about what happens when people see all of you. Not the curated version, the actual version. The parts that were not acceptable. The qualities that produced distance rather than warmth in the environments that shaped your first understanding of what love looks like. The shadow knows what happened the last time you were fully seen. The last time you did not manage yourself carefully enough for the people whose approval was required for your emotional survival. And it activates at the intimacy threshold, not to keep you lonely, to keep you safe from the specific version of being known that the only data it has tells it leads to abandonment. Even if the person in front of you now is nothing like the people who produced that data, even if being seen by them would produce something entirely different, the shadow does not update its beliefs without specific psychological work. It runs on the original programming until you go in and change it. The third pattern is the most painful. Jung called it the negative inflation of the self, the deeply buried conviction that you are specifically not the kind of person who gets to have the thing you want, not because you are unworthy in some abstract sense, but because the shadow is carrying the specific accumulated evidence of every time you reached for something and it did not arrive, every time you hoped for something and were disappointed, every time the gap between what you wanted and what was available communicated to your developing nervous system that certain things are simply not for you. And now, every time something good arrives, the shadow generates the experience of it being temporary, undeserved, about to be taken away, and to prevent the pain of losing it, you lose it first. You make the choice that guarantees the outcome the shadow believes was always inevitable, not because you want to be right about the belief, but because the pain of confirming it yourself is more tolerable than the pain of being blindsided by it. At least this way you had agency. At least this way you controlled the ending. Here is where Jung's work becomes genuinely transformative rather than just explanatory, because understanding the mechanism is not the same as being free of it, and the shadow does not respond to understanding alone. Jung said the shadow must be encountered, not analyzed, not explained away, met directly, honestly, in the specific way that a person who has been hiding in a dark room needs to be met, not with accusation, not with shame, not with the demand that they immediately vacate the space they have occupied since before anyone came looking, with the specific quality of attention that makes it safe to finally come into the light. He called this shadow integration, the deliberate and often uncomfortable practice of bringing the rejected material into conscious awareness. Not to become it, to acknowledge it, to stop pretending it is not there, To stop running the life from a premise of wholeness, while the shadow is quietly dismantling everything from below. Here is what this actually requires. The next time the sabotage happens, not in hindsight, in the moment, when you notice the procrastination beginning, when you feel the impulse toward the self-destructive choice, when the pull to walk away from the opportunity starts operating, before you act on it, pause and ask not why am I doing this? Ask what am I afraid this will cost me? Not rationally. Feel into it. What is the specific fear underneath the sabotage? What is the belief that this threshold is activating? What does the shadow think will happen if you go through the door this time? Jung said the answer to that question, honestly arrived at, without the immediate rush to reassure yourself that the fear is irrational, is the most precise map to the suppressed material that has been running your life from the dark. Because the shadow's fear is always specific. It is never abstract. It is never just a vague discomfort. It is the specific ancient conviction about what happens to people like you who try to have the thing you are currently approaching. And once you can see it, once you can name it, once you can trace it back to the specific environment and the specific experiences that generated it, something happens to its grip. Not immediately, not completely, but genuinely. The belief that was running you from the dark loses some of its authority the moment you drag it into the light, because beliefs that operate in the dark rely on not being examined. They rely on the specific power of the unconscious to direct behavior without the conscious mind noticing what is being directed or why. The moment you notice, the sabotage has to compete with something it has never had to compete with before. Your awareness. Jung said something about the shadow that I want you to carry with you after this. He said the shadow is not your enemy. It is the part of you that has been trying to protect you. And the only way it knows how. With beliefs that were formed in circumstances that no longer exist. With defenses built for a world you no longer live in. With the specific logic of someone much younger and much less equipped than the person you are now. Looking at the shadow with this understanding does not eliminate it, but it changes the relationship with it. From fighting something that is actively working against you, to having a difficult but genuinely necessary conversation with the part of yourself that has been the most loyal in the most misguided way. The part that kept you safe when you needed to be kept safe, and that now needs something it has never been given. Permission to update, to receive new evidence about what is actually possible, to stop protecting you from a world that no longer exists by dismantling the one you are trying to build. The sabotage is not your destiny, it is your homework. Every pattern of self-destruction is pointing precisely and accurately at the exact belief that needs to be witnessed, at the exact material that needs to come home, at the exact part of you that went underground, and that your most desired life is waiting for you to retrieve. Jung spent his entire career saying one thing: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The part of you that keeps sabotaging everything is not fate, it is a belief, a very old belief, living in the dark, waiting for you to finally come looking. It is time. If something in this named the pattern that has been confusing you the most, the specific way you keep arriving at the threshold of what you want and finding a way to not go through, that recognition is not small. It is the beginning of the most important conversation you will ever have with the part of yourself that has been running the show from the dark. Share this with the person in your life who keeps almost having what they want and then somehow not. They need to know the almost is not bad luck. It is information. And subscribe, because what comes next goes deeper into exactly how you have that conversation with the shadow and what becomes possible on the other side of it.